I was sailing with my youngest son at that time, about 16, 17 years of age, in Lake Washington, right beside Seattle. The day was perfect. Sun was out, heavy wind, just right for sailing. We were sailing in our 16-foot Snipe, a very fast, very nimble, and unsteady sailboat. For it to be sailed well, it takes a great deal of what we call ballast. But in this case, unlike a bigger sailboat that has the keel at the bottom, that weight below the waterline is the ballast. In this kind of a sailboat, it's the weight distribution of the sailors that creates the balance and the ballast. So on this day, with heavy wind, we were counting on each other being able to work well together. And I was ready to make a tack into the wind. And so, as I always did, I gave the command, ready to tack. And my youngest son said, ready to tack. So I turned the tiller and we started turning. Now, at that time, I would then move up typically to the upside of the boat because the boat's beginning to lean like this. And he, typically on the other side of the boat, would also move up on the upside because now we were going to have the heavy wind blowing us and we needed more weight on that upside. So as I turned into the wind and I shifted my position, he unfortunately started a little bit late so that when we got to the windward side, the boat just kept going over, and by then it was too late and we capsized the boat. We went flying almost like a slow motion movie into the sail of the boat, which then that weight pushed the sail down under the water, and before we knew it, we had turtled the boat. The top is on the bottom of the boat is above the water, and the mast is down below. We had turtled the boat. Boy, I learned a big important lesson that day in slow motion and technicolor. Ballast matters. Now, we both knew this, but we hadn't worked at shifting our weight and our positioning to keep that balance the way it should be in a heavy wind. Ballast matters. Get the ballast wrong, get the weight balance wrong, and the boat goes over. So much like leadership. Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Nelson, and this final episode of this series, 5 Practices That Successful Leaders Prioritize. This one we're going to talk about ballast again and the weight balance and what it takes to develop that kind of internal ballast and relational ballast. Let me explain a little bit further. There's research that's coming out about leadership, and the researchers have made this statement. They've said leaders need to work on the quality of their inner game before they can hope to develop their outer game. Leaders need to work on the quality of their inner game before they can hope to develop their outer game. What is the inner game that they're talking about? They say their capacity to tune into and regulate their emotional and mental states. That's the kind of ballast I've been talking about in this whole series for leaders. Leaders, to be effective, have to work on the inner game before they develop their outer game. Because it is the inner game then that goes on to communicate with the outer game. And when those two games come into alignment, there is superpower that takes place for the leader, and everyone around them can notice it. This is why it's so important for leaders to surround themselves with people that they trust. The challenge for leaders this day and age, especially the higher up they go in an organization, is they get surrounded by yes people who are afraid to speak truth to that leader for fear of losing their jobs. So everything the leader hears is something in affirmation of that leader. Whether the leader comes up with an idea and they say, oh yeah, perfect, great idea, let's go with it. Or whether the leader is doing something really stupid and the people surrounding that leader are afraid to call it out. So they sort of talk around it without really confronting the truth. Anyway, it's that kind of challenge that a leader faces, and that's why it is so vital for that internal ballast to be heavy enough that leader must be surrounded by people that leader can trust to say the truth in any situation. That leader can have the humility to accept the truth in any situation, even if it goes against what that leader is feeling. That leader must be covered by people who are willing to hold up a mirror from time to time. And the leader can trust them to know that they have his or her best interests in mind and want the success of that leader to take place. It's interesting, isn't it, how few of us, whether we're in leadership positions or not, have people that we can count on, that we can be totally honest with, totally transparent with. I'm recognizing in my own life, and as I work with other leaders, the vitality of being a part of groups like masterminds, peer groups, support groups, places where we are not faced with our own employees so that we have the power differential over them and therefore they're afraid to speak the truth to us, but we're surrounded by people who can be objective, who don't have an inner stake or outer stake in what we do and what we say. That's what a mastermind does, a group of people that meets together regularly. I've been in the same mastermind now for about 5 or 6 years. We know each other so well at this point and we each know that the others in the group love us and support us and believe in us 100%, so we can shed the masks, shed the image consultants, and show up in transparency, knowing that as they hold the mirror up, they'll be able to reflect back to us what they see, what they hear, what we're wrestling with, what the issues are. They can chime in saying, here's what we hear you wrestling with. Have you considered this? That's the power of a mastermind, a peer group, a support group of some kind. Leaders need to have accountability partners. They could be trusted close friends, can be coaches. I've hired coaches multiple times in my career, and every time those coaches have been able to help me get to the next level. And they hold me accountable to whatever steps I talk about that wanting to take. They hold up that accountability to me. Greg, how did it go this last week or these last couple weeks in doing the steps that you outlined you wanted to do? That's what an accountability partner has. I've hired coaches to be those accountability partners. I have 2 best friends that live in separate parts of the country, and I'm on the phone with them almost weekly. And those gentlemen know me so well inside and out that I trust their judgment, I trust their wisdom, and I trust their honesty. Therefore, I can show up completely transparent and not be afraid of negative judgment. They're going to believe in me no matter what. They want my very best. That's what an accountability partner does. That's what a trusted person can provide, the gift they can provide for us. In my book, The Strategic Stop, in chapter 9, I talk about these 5 issues in this series. You can read more in detail in that chapter 9. In my book, I make this statement on this issue of accountability and support for leaders. Leaders need this kind of mutual support to empower them to be their best selves, to do the necessary weeding and cultivating in order to develop more depth, more ballast. I really like that statement because it uses the metaphor of weeding and cultivating. It's sort of the planting the seed metaphor, right? If you want to see a healthy plant grow, you have to weed the environment, you have to dig deep so the soil is deep enough to then allow the roots to drop down deep enough. It needs to be watered, it needs to be nourished so that it can grow in healthy ways. That's the ballast, that's the depth we cultivate and weed. Sometimes, as I talked about in the last episode, we have blind spots, we don't see ourselves. There are weeds starting to grow that are impacting us. That's why we need trusted people around us to help point that out. Hey, I see this weed growing up. Have you seen this before? And what can we do to support you in pulling that weed from your life? Highly significant, highly valuable. Necessary to do the weeding and the cultivating to develop more depth in our lives. So I'm going to ask you a question. Who do you have in your life that you regularly share yourself with? hugely significant question. Anybody? It's possible it could be your spouse or significant other. It's possible you've developed good, deep, strong, honest friendships through the years and you have one of those individuals or several. It's possible that you've actually hired coaches to help keep you accountable and keep you moving forward to fulfilling your greatest dreams. Who do you have in your life that you regularly share yourself? And that key word is regularly. If we just do this once a year, that may help, but it doesn't develop the weeding, the cultivating that needs to happen on a consistent and regular basis. Who do you have in your life? Do you feel completely safe in those relationships so that you can be honest and transparent in every way? Are you open to supportive feedback? That's an important quality for a leader. And sometimes we have a harder time receiving that feedback from the people who report to us at work. But if we're in a part of a support group, a mastermind, or we're in an accountability partnership with someone, that we give them that permission. I want your feedback, and I will humbly receive it. And that's the challenge right there, right? Humbly receive it. Do you have people in your life whom you trust to challenge you and to challenge your beliefs, even to challenge some of your ways of being as they encourage and validate your progress of moving forward? It's people who can challenge that and they can feel completely safe to challenge because you've given them the permission to do that. Leaders need this kind of mutual trust, mutual support, mutual encouragement, and mutual accountability in order for leaders to be their best and most effective, successful selves. We just have to have it. And if you don't have someone like that, or several people, or several groups like that in your life, I encourage you and implore you to begin looking for people that you can trust, that over time you develop this kind of honesty and transparency with. It's a game changer. And that's the way you develop depth and ballast. Richard Foster, one of the great spiritual writers of this era, made a great statement. He said, the desperate need is not for a great number of intelligent people or gifted people, but for more deep people. He is spot on. We need more deep people. And the only way that we can have depth and ballast is, unlike Michael Plant, we pay attention to that inner game before we put all the emphasis on the outer game. Our ability to understand ourselves and to monitor our own character and integrity and the trust that we have on ourselves, with ourselves and others. More deep people. I want to be that kind of person. Because ballast matters. And when we don't have it, then like Michael Plant, who faces the great storm of his life, loses his life. That's not what I want for you or for me. Thanks for listening and watching. I'll see you next time.